Arsenal won the Premier League and reached the Champions League final last season. Apparently, everything is perfect for the 26-27 season to follow the same path. But Arteta thinks differently. The margins are very small, and if we want to improve when the level rises, we need to increase internal competition. Just look at the transfer market and what our rivals are doing. We are very active trying to improve and evolve the team. That's clear. Those are the words of the coach himself, who promises to come back even more intense for next season. 3 gaps are so clear in Arsenal's squad, and to fill those gaps, they promise not to hesitate to spend money in this transfer window to stay at the top in England. Vini Jr. and Bruno Guimarães are among the main targets in the market. How far can Arteta's team go with the new signings? The whole discussion starts here, when we look at the board with Arsenal's probable starting lineup for next season. And some gaps are already quite clear. In goal, goalkeeper Raya was the best goalkeeper of last season in the Premier League and, why not, the best goalkeeper in the world. Besides that, for a team that was extremely consistent defensively, Raya fought to be the best player of the season in the Premier League, and he ended up losing to Bruno Fernandes in the final stretch. When we look at the defensive line, the system is basically set up with 4 centre-backs. Timber should be coming back from injury at the start of this season. Even though he probably won't get all the minutes he needs, he's likely to be Arteta's starting choice for the rest of the year. Saliba, as you probably remember, left the game against Spain in the World Cup with a back injury and a lot of pain. And he should undergo conservative treatment, so he'll be out for at least half the season. And here's the first gap for Arsenal. Last season, Saliba stood out as one of the best defenders in the world, with a good ability to move forward, but mainly to defend the space in behind. A team that will have more possession than their opponents in most games of the season needs defenders who not only know how to protect the box and make a lot of clearances, but also have good speed to prevent counterattacks and good build-up ability. If the team is going to have the ball, every player has to take part in that phase, and Saliba will be a huge absence. To compensate for the Frenchman's absence, there's discussion about signing the Englishman Konsa, who had a great World Cup, especially when it comes to tracking back, defending at pace, and in open space situations. He was involved in a highly controversial play, blocking a clear scoring chance for Ghana without the referee awarding a penalty. Alongside Saliba, Gabriel Magalhães, and Hincapié, who now has a permanent contract with Arsenal and is officially a signed player, no longer on loan. But the other gaps, and maybe the most important ones in the squad, are from midfield forward. This was the midfield that Arteta planned for last season. Zubimendi as the holding midfielder, and Rice as the more advanced midfielder, and Odegaard as the third man in midfield, getting forward into the final third and creating most of the Gunners' chances. The problem is that a team planning to try to win every title throughout the season will play more than 70 games in a year, and some players won't necessarily be able to handle it. This was exactly the case with Zubimendi, the 27-year-old Spanish midfielder who joined Arsenal as a reinforcement last season and played in 38 Premier League matches, starting in 34 of them. If we look at the whole season, it was 57 games, 48 as a starter, and obviously at some point it was going to take its toll. Besides Zubimendi, Rice was also heavily overworked during the season, and for the final stretch, Arteta decided to make some changes. He took out the Spanish midfielder and put in the young Englishman Lewis Kelly. He even started in the Champions League final. Obviously, anyone who wants to fight for all the titles needs to have a strong squad, and maybe putting such a young and inexperienced player in isn't Arteta's main idea for next season. Most channel subscribers have likely seen these videos and know Manchester United, Liverpool, and Manchester City's potential for the 26-27 season. And Arsenal couldn't be left behind. If you didn't know that, click down here and subscribe so you don't miss any of the upcoming videos. Rice, playing further forward, is the second man in midfield. He knows how to play as a defensive midfielder, but also gets forward into the attack. It's a role very similar to what he played for England in the last World Cup, where he did very well. And Odegaard, obviously, as I already mentioned, is the player who created the most chances for this Arsenal. He can play as the first, second, or third midfielder. Odegaard has a clear backup. Izzy was signed last season and has interesting potential to become a starter this season. But Rice and Zubimendi lack a slightly more experienced player. And this is where Bruno Guimarães comes in. Opta released this article. A very interesting article, and I want to highlight some points about the importance of what Bruno Guimarães can add to this Gunners team. The Brazilian has a contract until 2028, and if Arsenal wants to secure his services, they'll have to pay a very high price for it. One of the most underrated aspects of any signing is availability. Few Premier League players compare to Guimarães in this regard. Since his debut for Newcastle in February 2022, he has played 195 matches, more than any other player at the club since January 2022. Guimarães has only missed 16 league games. So, if Arsenal has the bold goal of competing for the Premier League title once again, and maybe even for the Champions League trophy, they will need a player who is always available. That's where Zubimendi disappointed last season. The full article also has some interesting data. Newcastle's numbers from February until now with and without Bruno Guimarães. With him, their points percentage is 52.3%. Without him, their points percentage is 12.5%, 16 games without the Brazilian. Only 2 wins. This article from The Athletic also brings some other very interesting data, talking about Bruno Guimarães' playmaking ability. It shows that he could be the solution for more than one of Arsenal's problems. If Zubimendi hasn't lived up to expectations, or at least not for as long as expected, it's still possible to imagine that with a very packed World Cup, playing as many games as possible like England did, who played the same number of games as champion Spain, Rice might end up missing some games this season due to overload. So, having Bruno Guimarães, who can play as the first, second, or even third midfielder, will be fundamental. And if before people talked about £60 million, I believe he's worth much more, and that Arsenal probably won't hesitate to spend money on signing the Brazilian, and this part is really interesting. No player from Howe's team, now the former Newcastle coach, made more line-breaking passes per 90 minutes in the Premier League last season. And the rest of the top 5 was made up of defenders, who tend to have more space on the field to pass the ball. In comparison, Tonali, who ended up transferring to Tottenham this season and was one of the big names linked with Tottenham, Manchester City and Arsenal throughout the season, ranked 10th in the squad with 10.9 passes of this type per 90 minutes. What stood out most to me was this other paragraph. Guimarães' courage with the ball in tight spaces can be seen below, as 12 passes made under high pressure every 90 minutes put him in a prominent position among his peers throughout the last European season. Here we have the chart for the 23-24, 24-25, and 25-26 seasons. And each of these dots here represents a player from the top 5 European leagues, and look how interesting this is. This highlighted yellow dot here is actually Bruno Guimarães. In that season, he was here among the players who made the most passes in high-pressure situations. In 24-25, he dropped a little more. Exactly in a season where he started playing a little further back, more as a defensive midfielder. In 25-26, it was his best season in this aspect, delivering 12 passes in high-pressure situations. I even got curious to know who those other players ahead of him are. Passes in high-pressure situations are exactly passes in situations like this, where Bruno Guimarães, wearing number 39, is surrounded by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Manchester City players, and even so, he still manages to finish the play well. Let's see how it all happened. When we rewind, Manchester City clears the ball, and it ends up right with Bruno. In the next moment, he controls it and takes the ball straight into pressure. Maybe the riskiest situation a midfielder could get into. One of the worst possible situations. But he handles it all very well, as soon as he's pressured and surrounded by all the players. He uses his body very well to shield the ball, and he makes a quick pass forward looking for a 1-2. In other words, he's not necessarily the player who's going to make runs and carry the ball for long distances. But he's the kind of player who, even under pressure, manages to find an alternative. The pass goes further forward, and now, without the ball, he gets free again. Now, in a more advanced position on the field, once again, he finds himself under pressure again, surrounded by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Manchester City players. He manages to carry the ball for a short distance. Remember that. He's not a player who makes very long runs with the ball, but he does really well in very tight spaces. And even so, he manages to make the pass under pressure for Newcastle to score the goal that would open the scoring against Manchester City, probably one of Arsenal's biggest rivals in recent years. Opta, which is one of the biggest sources of football data in the world, also brings this very interesting point, an analysis of his touch map between the 2025-26 and 2024-25 seasons. It reveals a player who has evolved his role. Guimarães has been asked to push further up the field, participating more in dangerous areas, especially on the right side. This supports the idea that he could play as a midfielder for Arsenal in a 4-3-3 formation. Check this out. This is a comparison of Bruno Guimarães' 2 seasons. The more purple this area on the field is, the more involved he was in that region of the pitch. So if before he was more involved in the defensive area, there are several really white spots here, even showing a negative variation. We can already start to see some purple spots here in this area of the field, especially when thinking about a 4-3 formation. Him playing more as a midfielder on the right, and it's exactly in this scenario that I like to see that Bruno Guimarães could probably be the player to play in Zubimendi's role, or Rice's role, or very likely also in this Odegaard position for some important situations during the season. Some situations where Arsenal needs to have 3 more creative midfielders. Bruno can be exactly that player, but let's be honest, the most natural thing is for this to happen. Zubimendi drops out. Who is the player with less experience and less background? And we might see Bruno maybe playing a bit higher up, while Rice becomes the holding midfielder, which he is totally capable of doing. Besides that, both of them have a lot of ability to switch positions. Bruno has already played as the first, as the second, and now he's been this third man in midfield. He is maybe the most complete midfielder in the entire Premier League, and the best player who would fit into this Arsenal model. When we move forward on the field, we have this final third with 3 players. Tzoles, who was possibly one of the most impactful signings of Arsenal's last transfer window, but who still hasn't established himself. And in the Champions League final, he was left out in favor of Havertz. He should be one of Arteta's main hopes for this season. On the right, Saka, who has already become a recent fan favorite at the club, will probably be the starter. On the left, the doubts begin. Trossard, who was a starter for much of last season, was transferred and left for Besiktas. Who came in to replace him was Tzoles, the Greek who played in the Belgian league and arrived for 40 million euros. And when we look at Arteta's ambitions for this season, it doesn't seem to me that Tzoles and Martinelli will be the players to fight for that position. And all the news suggests that Arsenal is indeed after the signing of Vini Jr. for that left wing. The real situation is that Vini is entering the last season of his contract with Real Madrid and is being managed by Rock Nation, Jay-Z's agency. They are asking for improved contract terms. Basically what happened is that at Real Madrid, that's the most common thing. It's that the player splits 50% of his image rights with the club. Florentino Perez understands this because of the exposure that Real Madrid offers to that player, and that he will probably get many new sponsors, so half of all of Vini Jr.'s image rights go to the club. This was a rule set in stone at the Spanish club, but since Mbappe's arrival, there's an exception. The Frenchman's contract with the Spaniards states that 80% of the image rights belong to the player himself, and only 20% go to Real Madrid. In other words, Vini wants to be on the same level as Mbappe, not because of rivalry, but for contractual fairness. Right at the time of renewal, it seems that Real Madrid doesn't want to give in, and Vini, on the other hand, doesn't want to either. And behind the scenes, it's even being said that the Brazilian called some players, his national team teammates, to find out what life is like in London. And Vini is exactly what Arsenal needs most right now. The Athletic also reported some very interesting stats about Vini at Real Madrid. I wanted to bring this here for you. Here are some general stats, but what interests me most is right here. One of the first possibilities is that Vini would help Arsenal against opponents who play on equal terms. And here we can imagine, for example, Arsenal and Manchester City with Arsenal. The transition and counter-attack ability of Vinicius Jr. would make opponents think twice before going on the attack, since he could punish teams in the blink of an eye. The Premier League in recent seasons has become an increasingly physical league, precisely because it has players who know how to burst in behind the defense. Manchester City, for example, became known for this with Haaland, scoring many goals this way, and Arsenal themselves in the Champions League final also left their mark with a goal from Havertz in the same situation. And Vini has this very precise characteristic, even having scored this goal here against Benfica in exactly the same scenario, in open space, attacking with space to explode behind the defense. But not only that, Vini is an extremely versatile player, and with dangerous crosses, corners and fouls won, or cutting inside to shoot with his right foot, his stronger foot. There is an unpredictability in his actions that should be celebrated. The numbers confirm this careful observation, with Vinicius Jr. showing a similar tendency to direct his shots to the near post, choosing it 20% of the time, and to the far post 24% of the time when he positions himself in his preferred zone on the left side. In other words, Vini is the guy who knows how to explode behind the defense. But not only that, he's a guy who offers a lot as a dribbler, especially in counter situations. Situations where Arsenal, they often face this during the season, in the Premier League, in matches against teams from the lower half of the table. It's normal to see Arsenal playing against 5-man defensive lines and teams that are very compact and very defensive. And before, it was limited to just Saka, to be that player to win on the counter. With Vini arriving at the Emirates, it would be a huge reinforcement. This part of the article here, with this graphic, is really interesting. It shows where Arsenal creates most of their opportunities in this last season, 25-26. 42% of the chances were created on the right side, exactly Saka's side. Only 32%, 10 percentage points lower, came from the left side. This is probably due to a qualitative imbalance. On the right, you have Saka. On the left, it was Trossard or Martinelli. The idea is that Vini would arrive to help balance this equation and make Arsenal just as strong attacking on both sides. This play here, to me, is very interesting. It shows exactly what we can expect from Arsenal next season. Take a look. Brazil here in the World Cup is building up on the right side, and I want to draw your attention to this guy here. Brazil's number 8 Bruno Guimarães, and here stepping into the box is number 7 Vinicius Jr., who next season might be teammates. As Brazil attacks, Bruno Guimarães keeps moving away from his marker, staying in the defense's blind spot. The defense has to drop back, and Bruno keeps getting free. In the opposite situation, he receives this pass and looks for a 1-2. He knows he's drawn the defender, and Ryan is going to make a run behind the defense. The play doesn't work out right away, okay? The ball gets to Ryan very well, but he ends up losing it. Once again, look at Bruno Guimarães' intensity as he presses and recovers the ball, right in this area of the field, the area where he was most effective last season at creating dangerous situations. Here, he gets ready and crosses to the far post for Vini to score, with no goalkeeper left. But the goal that stands out the most is the one against Morocco. Brazil starts a transition, and look at Bruno Guimarães holding his run while the entire Moroccan defense drops back. He's going to receive this cutback pass. You'll see all the Moroccan players in this area of the field coming up to press the ball, and this matches the data showing that Bruno Guimarães does really well in these situations. While under high-pressure situations, you see everyone watching the ball and everyone forgetting about Vini Jr. behind the defense, where Bruno Guimarães is going to find the pass. Vini will receive it and cut inside. This is where he prefers to finish. The Athletic article highlights how he splits his finishes between the near and far post. Here, he sets up well and surprises the goalkeeper by finishing to the opposite side, scoring the equalizer for the national team. With the arrival of the two Brazilians, this could very well be Arsenal's starting lineup next season. Raya, Timber, Saliba, Magalhães, and Nkapie in defense. Rice, Bruno Guimarães, and Odegaard. And assuming here that practically any player can play any role. And Ease would still be on the bench. Vini Jr., Gyökeres, and Saka. A top-tier team, and it shows how the margins are very small in the Premier League. And even after being champions last season and reaching the Champions League final, Arsenal will look to strengthen their squad to stay at the top of the league once again. And if you like the Premier League, I want to invite you to watch this video. And if you also want to follow other stories and interesting analyses about promising teams in European football, binge watch this playlist here because it's also a hit. I'll see you there.